Everybody, give yourselves a round of applause for showing up and create some noise. It's been a while since we've gotten to hear sound from other people in a room, so thank you. My name's JC Lippold. I'll be your co-host for today as we move through some poll questions from you, a wonderful conversation between Paul and Mike Stigers, CEO of Cub Foods. But as we jump on into this morning, please understand the opportunity you have to be here right now, right? There'll be some times that we want to have you pull out your cell phone to provide some data through polls, but I always like thinking of the word nowhere, right? If we place the space after the W, it's now here. If we don't place space at all, we're nowhere. Take the time to be in this space and see who you meet, see what you learn today. As we gather today to listen to Mike Stigers share his wisdom on leadership in just a little bit. But first, we want to do a little exercise. So on your notepads at your table, you're going to see two QR codes down in the QR codes down in the corner. One of them says 7 Fs. Go ahead and click on that. Take a little picture, and it will pull up the 7 Fs wheel exercise. The 7 Fs is a scorecard for us personally, and a great way to strengthen relationships, build trust, and embrace healthy tension with those around us. So here's what you need to do. As you pull up that exercise, it's going to ask you to rate the 7 Fs: faith, family, finance, fitness, friends, fun, and future. 1 being couldn't be any worse. 10 couldn't be any better. So take a minute right now and go ahead and rate where you are at in your life. How about a little 7 Fs music, Chris? We believe in good leadership that people grow in their 7 Fs as much at work as they do at home. Right? It's not a time to check yourself, do your work, and then get back to who you are and how you are the rest of your day. In today's highly volatile job market, I'm invigorated by the high-performing teams, right, who choose to care about the health and balance of the people that they work with within this way. So, do your self-work and engage with those people around you at work. Save today's results. Right, this exercise is available to you online. Maybe you set a reminder every single month when you show up to, let's say, the Good Leadership Breakfast, that you do it again and again and again to say, hey, how is this changing? Where am I placing my work? So there's always a great time for self-reflection, and this is one of those. Right now, I would love to introduce Paul Batz, Good Leadership Breakfast founder and creator, a thought leader in the executive coaching industry whose firm, Good Leadership, is creating the category of executive team coaching. Paul Batz, everybody. Hey!
Thank you. How can you not be grateful today? We got out of the house. We're so happy to see you all. Welcome to the version 3 of the Good Leadership Breakfast. We did version 1 for 9 years. And then we were forced into version 2. Before we did version 2, this was a picture of us broadcasting with one iPhone over Facebook 2 years ago this week. We were so nervous. We had no idea how to hook up the technology, and I bought those lights at Home Depot. And then we decided that we needed to keep doing this because everyone said, please hang in there, figure it out. So we did. We ended up at this awesome organization called CCX Media. They're in the room here today with the cameras, and we used their television studios, and we learned a lot about how to produce that kind of programming. And then we tested version 3.0 in this room in November of last year. We invited friends and family and sponsors, and we were asking, are you willing to try to come back? And what we learned was there was all this pent-up demand. And so we're so grateful that you're here today. I think the coffee hour could have gone on for 2 or 3 hours. JC had the hardest job, and that was to get your attention. So we're grateful about that. This whole thing started back down in the Great Recession. So we know how disruptive COVID has been, but the economy was much darker and the psyche of leaders was much lower during the Great Recession. And so it was in January of 2010, I sent an email to a bunch of family and friends and clients and asked, should we get together and have a breakfast meeting? Because I want to discuss this question, do you still believe goodness pays? That room we had a full attendance. There were 73 people who showed up. And even though it wasn't intentional, that became the first Good Leadership Breakfast. So here we are today. This is our 95th meeting. Yeah, isn't that something? And on the first poll question, I was reflecting, this is my 93rd, because there was 2 I didn't show up for. Paul Hill and my friend facilitated one of those meetings, and it was, we're super happy that in November it will be our 100th episode. So you'll hear more about that later. So it's important, today's meeting represents a lot of pent-up demand to talk about some things that we celebrate here. And there's 2 concepts I can think of specifically. The first one is this idea that goodness pays. Goodness is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. Encouragement, accountability, positive teamwork. Those things make organizations work. And then also this idea that good leadership makes a difference. Good leadership is the art and science of people working together to produce great results. Working together. We've all had that concept kind of change in our brains in the last 2 years. We're learning how to do that differently, which is terrific. Each one of these ideas, goodness pays and good leadership, point to our point of view, which we're really, really solid on now. And that is that good leadership is a team sport. It's not a superhero endeavor. We all understand that nothing significant ever happens alone. So when we started diving deeper into what do these concepts really mean, a research project that we did that led to the How Goodness Pays book confirmed that there are 4 values that are in organizations that perform financially really well over time, whose employees also say we're led with goodness. So those 4 concepts are up on the screen here next, I think. They're excellence, generosity, fairness, and positivity. And up until the pandemic, I was thinking about values as, soft. But what we saw during the pandemic is the good companies got better, and the ones who weren't so good did not get better. And we're learning that these concepts are actually, they're economic concepts. So think about it in the law of opposites. So how can you be successfully financially? If you're not built on excellence, people in your organization are not generous, the sense of fairness goes out the window, and people are not positive. Our mission here is to help drive these concepts deeper into you every single time you come here and have this conversation. We're so grateful we can do this together, especially sharing the same air. So now, my favorite part about version 3 has been that we have been collecting some research along the way. So now's when I want to introduce you to one of my colleagues, whose name is Kelsey. Coach Kelsey is one of the 16 coaches of Good Leadership Enterprises. She happens to live here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Kelsey and I have worked together on so many assignments in athletics, in business, and healthcare. Kelsey has 2 handsome young boys at home. And it's a special day because Kelsey's husband is being honored tonight by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal as one of the 40 under 40.
Yeah.
Please join me in welcoming Kelsey.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. I feel fortunate to get his applause, but yeah, no, I'm really, really proud of him. Thanks, Paul, for having me here this morning.
So what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so I'm excited to dive in. So we have more poll questions that we'll be doing. And what I love about them, Paul, is they give us the opportunity to measure some things that we don't often measure in business, but we know matter. Mm-hmm. So most of the questions will hit on those things. The other piece that's so great is that it'll be an opportunity for us to interact as an audience together to see what's on your minds and what's really being the lived experience for people in this room. And then lastly, we actually sent these questions out in advance in a pre-poll. So there's a group of people who answered these questions for us as well, who look on paper like the people in this room, but we know that they may not be, they're not the people who have self-selected into a breakfast focused on good leadership. So we're really excited to share this data with you too and kind of make some comparisons around it. So with that, let me introduce the first question. So the first poll question is, when the pandemic caused society to shut down in 2020, what did your team do? Did they adjust goals down, keep goals the same, adjust goals up, or maybe you just don't remember? So it's the same way that you did the first poll. You'll text 22333 if you haven't already and put good leadership in, and then you put your A, B, C, or D answer. All right, it looks like we're getting to a pretty good place with our poll here. So fascinating to see the responses. The first thing that's jumping out at me is a lot of people kept their goals the same, but we also see a good chunk of organizations where goals were adjusted down. I want to compare this to the data that we also had from the pre-poll. The biggest gap, the difference to me is that no one in this room seems to have forgotten what you did around the adjustments. But here we had 14% of people who said, I don't even remember what we did, which I think, Paul, we didn't see this coming, but to me that could reflect engagement.
Yeah, no question about it. And I also think about this being a little bit industry specific. Yeah, there were some organizations like hospitals that didn't really get to set their goals. And other organizations that saw their industries go away. We do quite a bit of work in hospitality as well. And so they had no choice but to adjust their goals down because no one showed up.
Well, and that's what we thought in advance, thinking through this, many of our questions, there's a clear goodness outcome in some of the answers, but this one really depends, I think, on what was the right decision for your business at the time.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so the second poll, since the pandemic began, do you feel like your team members know you personally and professionally more than before, the same as before, or less than before? This is so fun to see, Paul. This is dramatically different. So we've got about 70% of people saying their team members know them more than before. And if that is not representative of good leadership and goodness in this room, I don't know what is. The same, 22%, and less than before, 8%. So if you go to the data from the other group of people that we polled, you'll see such a dramatic shift to the more than before. A quarter more than before, a quarter less than before, and then a big chunk the same as before. I know at our table conversation, this kind of ties to how the 7Fs question was framed. Yes. And it came up that some of the people we've gotten to go deeper with that we were already close to, and then the looser connections fell away. And this speaks to when you don't have that intentionality from your leader driving those connections. Yeah,
so I think the most obvious thing here is that if you're drawn to a meeting where you're going to discuss good leadership, you think it's important to invest in the lives of the people on your team. That's pretty simple, but we work with clients all over the country, and many times when we introduce these ideas that you got introduced to this morning, they look at us like, huh? Yeah, so it's fun. This is rewarding to see this data.
Yeah, really, really fascinating and fun. So, okay, the last poll for us is this. Does your team leader spread positivity and encouragement while driving the team towards expected results? Pretty simple answers, yes, no, or sometimes. We've got 76% of people saying yes, and then we have 20% on sometimes and 5% for no. Paul, I'm kind of blown away by how dramatically different this is from our pre-poll data. We expected a difference, but this is pretty wild. Again, you'll see this. I mean, good leaders, we expect that they're spreading positivity. But we also know no one's perfect. So I had a little more space in my mind for the sometimes, and this is pretty incredible.
Well, it's to state the obvious, the people in this room are really lucky. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, and 31% sometimes, and 16% no, that would be a pandemic of negativity. Yeah. Yeah, and so we're lucky in this room to be led with people and work with people who are positive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, good. Well, thank you for doing this. I think you're going to hear some of those themes come back when we have the conversation with Mike. Yeah. It's so obvious that today's meeting means so many things. And in choosing a speaker for today, I wanted to make sure we chose somebody who was connected with our community, who really radiated the values that we're talking about here, and could also make a connection with us in a really simple way. I mean, who doesn't need a grocery store? What you're going to learn about Mike Stigers today is this is a man with amazing staying power. He grew up in the grocery business, but in California. So he's learned how to enjoy these Minnesota winters. And he's still involved with the California Rangers, an organization that he joined more than 50 years ago. It's an organization dedicated to helping young people really enjoy the outside. They teach things, outdoor skills and things like riding horses. He met his wife in the California Rangers. He's proud to say that he and his brothers are still really close. He said, I've got one of those families where everyone all the way across actually gets along. Huh. And what I learned through my Zoom relationship, this is a man with contagious energy, a deep commitment to anything he says yes to, and he's just the kind of guy that really radiates the values we're talking about. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Cub Foods, Mike Stigers. So the question I ask all CEOs is, did you always want to be a CEO?
No. I never really thought about it, Paul, to be honest. I started as a courtesy clerk in high school. I was a junior in high school sacking groceries. And you learn the business and you think this is fun and I'm doing it part-time. I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. And then before you know it, you realize you're a store manager and you just try to be a good store manager, and then you become a DM and a district manager, and you're working with your district and you're building your teams, and all of a sudden you get a tap on the shoulder and say, Mike, we have we want you to be a VP and a retail operations manager, and before you know it, you're here. And I never thought about being a CEO, and the first time when it really came to me was an opening for the C-suite at SuperValue. And I was a business unit leader, and they said, Mike, we're considering you for this executive C-suite position, and it's for high potential executives like yourself. And I go, well, a hypo means you got to go skip twice, right? And they said, yeah. And I go, well, that would be the CEO's job. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, we know that. And I'm like, okay, I'm the slow one in the room. But that's really when I started thinking about it, and I just, here we are. I mean, I never thought about it, seriously.
We hear that story a lot. Seldom when I ask that question, somebody says, oh yeah, when I was in college, I knew I was going to be a CEO. So I want to talk to you about this sense of lifelong learning, because you have an amazing history. I'll just tell the punchline and then you can fill in the details. You finished undergrad at 50 and your graduate school degree at 60. That is staying power. So let's talk about lifelong learning and why that's such an important value for you.
Well, first of all, I learned the professors are easy on the old guys. So, it's much easier that way. No, in all seriousness, in our business, in the grocery industry, a person can become very successful and have a good family, a good earning, and a good wage and a good position without a college degree. So at 21, when I was very young when I was promoted to store manager, I was 21 years old, and I was one of the youngest, and so there was no time for college. So in my heart, I knew that I was missing something. And I never wanted to put myself into a situation of not being able to progress for my family and for myself, so I always wanted to go back to college. And it really wasn't until I was an executive vice president that I thought, I need to get to college. So through University of San Francisco, I got a bachelor's in applied economics and went to school at night. And it was funny, on the first night when they're introducing everyone, the lady who was sitting next to me, she was younger than my son and my daughter, and she goes, oh my gosh, I'm getting blotchy, and I've been out of school for 4 years. I don't know if I could remember how to study. And I just thought, good God, I've been out of school longer than you've been alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we'll figure this out. And there you are. And then, I got my undergraduate and just really proud. And then I knew I had an opportunity to get a master's degree from University of Southern California, FIDON. So I learned to do that. So it's, here we are. And it's just been a great experience. I honestly believe that as fast as our industry is changing, as fast as the world is changing, with technology and everything else, you have to have a mindset of lifelong learning. And you learn from everyone, not just the structure of education, but your teammates. I mean, it's fun for me I think it's fun. The store managers might not, but you go into a store and I look at the newest hire and I go, okay, who's going to be the next CEO? And you look around the room and you look at the young cashier or the person in produce or the person in meat, And you start talking to them. I go, what are you doing? Are you going to school? Are you going to college? What's your thoughts? And they go, I don't know. We're just here for a while. And I go, yeah, I thought that too. And that was 47 years ago. But the reality is when we go into our businesses and your teams and you get to meet more of your teammates, you look at these folks and it's just the talent is just incredible. And there's a thirst for learning and belonging. So we have many educational programs now that we have for our teammates. We could take anyone for what we call a retail management certificate program, which is 8 community college courses, and we could take them from there all the way up to a graduate degree. And there's a glass ceiling that we hear about often, and usually that's on gender or race or whatever, but there's a glass ceiling of education that people put themselves under. And it really is important that we continue to break that glass ceiling and allow everybody to have the power of education. The gift of education, when someone finishes a class, it's just amazing to see a meat manager or a produce manager or a cashier who never thought they'd go to college. And they finish their first class and they stand a little bit taller. And then they finish their second class, and then their shoulders become a little more squared. And when they talk to you, they look you in the eye, and they have a little that extra pep in their step. And that's a gift of education that no one could ever take away. But what a small offer for us. So
well, there's goodness all over that for sure. Let's go back to the pandemic and the connecting between the Rodney King things and what happened here with George Floyd. How did that change you as a person?
After going through Rodney King, the civil unrest in Los Angeles, you never think you'd go through it again. And I'll never forget the Wednesday night when the city was erupting, and you could see what was going on. It's like, holy smokes, we're going through this again. And what I've learned through both of the both of the civil unrests, is that you see the best in people. At the end of the day, as ugly as it is, as traumatic as it is, you really see the best in people.
Well, let's talk about that. What did you see in the people of Cub Foods, the people in the community? You had a much cleaner vision on that than we did. We were watching it mainly through a TV lens. So what did you see?
On Friday morning, I remember I was out at the Lake Street store that was heavily damaged. It was still smoldering. And the shopping center across the street was on fire. There was still looting in the Target and the adjacent buildings, and the police were there, the fire trucks were there, obviously doing their jobs, and just hats off to the first responders, just absolutely incredibly brave people. And I remember standing next to the district manager at the time, and after we knew everyone was safe and accounted for, it was like, all right, we got to get, this store is going to be out of commission for months, if not a year or more. This community needs food. They need a grocery store. In 2 weeks, we got to be back in business. And Chris was the district manager who was with me, very tall guy. And I look up at him. I go, 2 weeks, we got to be back in business. And he looks at me and goes, are you nuts? And I go, well, no, seriously, we got to. This is what we need. And then you just start putting the plans together. And what I experienced through our team is just incredible dedication of a mission that we have to serve the communities, and everyone just coalesced around each other. But when you have trust as a team, and we have each other's back, and we all work together, those aren't just buzzwords. That means that, when you're a CEO and you say, trust me, that means that if you're in an operation and it's not too good right now, you manage and coach. You don't get out the discipline, you manage and coach.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that here in a second, but I also want to remind you all that you have the ability to ask a question for Mike through your app. If you go back onto the 22333, there's a place that says type in a question if you have one, and then Kelsey's going to have some questions from the audience here in a couple minutes. I want to talk about leadership now, and we have done some research on your behalf. We interviewed some people that report to you who are on your team to find out what some of your success habits are. But before we get there, I'm curious to find out, what are you looking for? What's the short answer for what are you looking for in selecting leaders who become the people on your team?
Integrity. Integrity, agility, honesty, people who could really understand teamwork, and they really understand servant leadership. And a lot of folks won't understand servant leadership, but you could watch them as a servant leader. And transformational leaders.
Yeah, that's great, and obviously aligned with how we think. So let's talk about these success habits. So what we do when we interview speakers, we ask them to identify some people on their team that we can interview. And what we're trying to do is to figure out what is their core leadership style related to their team, and then through the eyes of their followers, what are their success habits? And it's always really fun to be able to tell these speakers, here are the success habits we found out about you. So you go back to that relational structural thing. We learned that you're a structural guy. You're a very nice human being and very fun to spend time with, but you are clearly a structural leader. And the way we think about that is you think a lot about planning and organizing. So how do you set your team up to succeed? What kind of things do you do?
Well, first off, I want to thank my teammates who are here. It's great to have folks from both Cub and UNFI here today, so thank you for being here. And everyone, a team needs direction, and a team needs goals, and how are we going to accomplish those goals? But there has to be principles within an organization that everyone can, I feel, belong to and coalesce around, and the guiding principles. So there's 3 that we have, and they're so basic. It is non-debatable store standards, world-class customer service, and food safety. And everyone within our organization, all 10,000 Cub teammates, should be able to speak to those 3 things, because everything we do evolves those 3 things. And when a team is able to grasp on to 3 very simple basic goals and objectives, then everything else kind of falls into it. And you just simply say, well, okay, it's not a hard problem. This is about store standards, so let's talk about that. And then it breaks everything down to, I think, it allows people to be more comfortable to really accomplish their objectives.
Well, let's talk about what we learned as success habits. The first one relates to one of the questions that we asked in our research. And so the first success habit we learned from you is unwavering goals. And unwavering is a fascinating word. We got that from one of the interviews. So tell us, how do you do that? I mean, why is that important in your mind? And how do you keep people focused with this unwavering goals concept?
If through the work that we do through servant leadership and the things that I've said as far as trust and honesty and having each other's back, then you focus into the unwavering goals of the organization, because it's incumbent upon us as leaders to make sure that everyone in the organization understands what their role is, what their spot on the team is, and how important they are on the team. Whether it's the newest hire in the clean team or the newest cashier we have in the stores, and how important their job is to us. And by staying laser focused on what the objectives are, it's very easy then to speak to everyone about how important their position is to the team and how important they are to me and to the community they serve and to all the leaders that we have in the company.
I love how that fits with some things we found out in the How Goodness Pays research, and it's the concept of where do I fit and why do I matter? Very, very simple, and some organizations have not been very good at that during the chaos of COVID, but clearly yours has. There's a second one that I really love, and this is this idea of outside-in perspectives. As coaches, we're surprised at how many people push back on that idea, but clearly, I mean, you've got a lot of different ways you bring that to your team. You've told me stories about walking the grocery store floor. So why do you think outside-in perspectives is so important, and how do you go about doing it?
So if it's, I think some of it I've learned through just honestly some pretty poor leadership. I remember when I was a young clerk or a new store director or a new store manager, and we get executives coming in from either the corporate office or the division office, and they just walk right past you. And I'm just like, whoa, hello. And you're like, wow, why would someone do that? And the opportunity to be into a store or to walk around the office and to talk to people and ask them what their opinions are and what do they think about this, and talking about lifelong learning. You go up to a brand new intern. In fact, one of the most fun days is the intern kickoff for Summer Intern Day. But it really is exciting when people have no foundation of what can't be accomplished. When you ask them, how do we solve this? They will come at things and they will bring suggestions and ideas up. We'll sit in the office and just know that we know better. And yet you go out and ask a store manager what's going on. They say, oh no, Mike, you just need to do it this way and it'll all work. or you go to your district managers, or you go to the people on the field, and you just talk to customers. I mean, that's the most fun. Is I have a business card that's got a $5 coupon attached to it, and it's a generic business card that has my name and the my office phone number. And it's great to go up to a customer and just say, "Hi, I'm Mike, and might give you a $5 coupon for today or on your next visit. If you ever need anything, just give me a call." And they just look at me like, who? Seriously?
Sure.
But the amazing thing is, it's a way, when you hand someone a $5, they almost feel compelled to say something to you. Mm-hmm. So, you get some immediate response back from that. But the emails I've gotten and the phone calls I've gotten from customers have been just so helpful in helping us serve our communities better and stronger.
Yeah, we've actually many times turned down new client relationships because they were not willing to do an outside-in interview process to create their strategy.
The most humbling thing is to go to a customer focus group where you're behind the window. Boy, if that's not humbling, because the interviewers will ask all kinds of questions, and you're just like, oh, we thought that was a good idea, or we're all behind there going, that was your idea, it wasn't mine.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But you all sit there, but at the end of the day, you own it.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing is when you get criticism or you hear suggestive comments or whatever, that it's not personal. Mm-hmm. We all have to work on this to get to the right choice.
Well, the third success habit we found was identical, the exact same words as we collected for Terry Rasmussen, who runs Thrivent, back in October of 2021. And the words are intentional check-ins. Mm-hmm. And I think this is related to what we've been talking about at 7F's Wheel and our need for connections at the office. And so let's talk about this. Your people said you are really, really good at the intentional check-in. Why do you do it, and how do you do it?
So 2 ways of intentional check-ins I follow is, if we're in a staff meeting, everyone has to speak. And if I see someone who's not speaking, I'll ask them, do you have anything to add? Or, you people are on your team for a reason. And the more options or the more opinions people have from different views, it just makes the solution and the final answer that much stronger. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting. Like Laura is our general counsel. We'll be in a staff meeting and an operations problem will come up, or an opportunity, or merchandising. I'll go, Laura, what do you think? Or I'll to our CIO, what do you think? And it's just really interesting to have the thought process from an attorney or from a technician and someone from outside. And it's just really cool that truly builds the team. And mm-hmm. then you just take that further and further mm-hmm. out to the districts, out to the stores. And when you openly discuss problems or opportunities. But then the other thing I do is one-on-ones, where mm-hmm. For my direct reports, and then other times I'll just call folks out in the stores and say, what's going on, how you doing? But the one-on-one is their time for me. It is not my time for me to talk to them about their business. It is their time for me. Mm-hmm. And it's, usually if there's something, we'll chat for a few minutes, and I'll say, okay, what you got? Mm-hmm. And then, then it's, we talk about anything. We talk about family, we talk about business, we talk about whatever they want to talk about. But it allows me to really get to know them more, my teammate, and it allows the teammate to get to be more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And it's just the opening up of, that's how you have each other's back.
Yeah, fantastic. We call that relational capital. Yeah, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now it's time to invite our friend Kelsey back. Kelsey has some questions to ask you that came from the audience here. So take it away, Kelsey.
Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely. I think we have time for 2 questions. Okay. So the first one from the audience is, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Go to school first. Go in the right order. It's much easier. Follow your heart, follow your passion, and be true to yourself, and be true to the family.
Cool. Thank you.
Very well stated.
Yep. And for our second question, actually, we are going to go to an audience member. So, JC? Yeah, thanks.
Good morning, Josh.
Oops, yeah.
Perfect.
There we go.
I can hear myself now. Thank you for sharing your story and inspiring words. I'm really to dive deeper into the manage and coach section you talked about. When you solicit all this information, you're talking to store employees and community members. How do you decipher that? How do you give your team to decipher that and prioritize? Where do we invest? How do we figure out what's next for that? Because it sounds like a lot of information coming in every day from lots of different angles.
A ton of information. You're absolutely right. And I think as long as the team understands the direction we're going and the parameters we have, then we're able to make the right choices. And a lot of times, if you ask someone for their opinion and then you don't follow their opinion, they're like, oh, well, that worked. So I always try to go back to the person who I did not follow their advice or suggestion to let them know that, hey, really strong recommendation, but there's no wrong answer here, but here's the direction we're going to go and here's why. And I think the why is what is so critical. So I think the more everyone on the team understands the direction we're going and from the why perspective and what our objectives are, then it just kind of fills in. But I've never, my biggest concern is to ask questions and not be able to appropriately respond. And then people just feel an empty suit ask them a question. And that's to me is just really unacceptable. So we always try to get back, I always try to get back to the folks who have offered their advice or counsel.
Excellent. Well, you and I have talked about this in advance. I never spring this question, but we've been asking for about 8 years this question to all of our speakers. And that is the idea that we're gathering here to celebrate Goodness Pays. And so how do you know for sure that goodness pays in your leadership?
When I see great teammates that I work with, like I'm here today, but there was about January of this year, I got an email from one of our store directors who had his first son. And he was off on paternity leave, and he sent me a picture of his brand newborn son, just infant, like hours old. And then about a half hour after that, I received another email from one of our teammates who was out, who just had her second daughter. And within a half hour, you saw pictures of 2 infants. And I'm like, holy smokes, what a responsibility. We've got to make sure this company is strong and successful and takes care of our communities so these new newborns have a great future. And it's through, I think, the goodness of what we do as a company and as people supporting each other that we're able to see new life come in and into the world. And all of us as leaders have responsibility for those new children.
It's a fantastic answer. We can tell why the people at Cub Foods are so excited about their work, and it's very clear to us that you radiate goodness.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Paul.
Yeah.
So everybody, looking ahead to next month, right now is a really good time to write down this date. Friday, April 29th. Natalie Stute, Chief Human Resources Officer at Gainwell Technologies, will be our guest. Excited to talk about her success habits when it comes to leadership. Thanks to Kelsey, Paul. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I'll hand it back to Paul.
Yeah, awesome. So lots of things to talk about as we leave here today. I have a story, a prediction, and then also I have a challenge for leaders. We work with a lot of different organizations, and we've actually been lucky enough to coach 5 CEOs who became CEO the first time during COVID. And so it's been a really interesting time. And one woman I can think of, she took over a really complicated organization. The board was not getting along. And they brought her in because the 4 main indicators that they track as a business were all failing. And what she discovered in the process was that the former CEO and CFO were these really dynamic people. We call them the superhero kind of leaders. Turns out, even though there were 1,700 people in the organization, those 2 basically made every decision. So they would go away and they would have this planning session, and then they would get approval from the board chair, not even the full board, and then they would go back and just tell people what to do. So she is enlightened as a leader, and she really believed that people are only engaged if they're involved. So she asked us to help put a process together to engage the top 40 people in building a whole new direction for the organization. And guess what? They didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. Tons of pushback. And what we discovered here is the reason why I'm telling you this story. People like CEOs and me, business owners and things like that, we can't help ourselves. We're constantly thinking about how much better the world's going to be if we just go in this direction. But the more excited we get, the more disruptive and afraid many, many, many people get. The people in this organization actually liked getting orders. They were afraid to think out loud, including the C-suite. And so here we are now, about 18 months later. 50% of the managers are gone, and 6 out of the 8 C-level people are gone as well. And what's fascinating about that is now they're actually starting to thrive again. because people have each other's backs and they're engaged in what's going on. They're helping each other set goals. They're solving problems together. All the kind of themes that you just heard from Mike here today. So this idea that goodness is when people thrive together, that's really the reason why we do this work. So I'm excited about that, but I also have a prediction to make. We're starting to see the masks go away. Our society is opening up. I think spring is going to be euphoric and summer is going to be fancy-free. Expect everyone to use their PTO. But also, we're very much aware of the Great Resignation, and people are asking the questions, at what cost? That 7F's wheel tool we use on our phones, it's not just this fluffy little thing you do at breakfast every once in a while. It's how people measure at what cost. Am I willing to work longer and harder? Actually, the answer is no. COVID taught us that working longer and harder than your colleagues is no longer a badge of honor. And this is the great enlightenment. And as we start to pinch down our work from home and return to office rules this fall, we can expect a whole lot of people to be making decisions about where they want to go to work. So my challenge for you is think about how can you use things like 7Fs? How can you use the filters of goodness to actually engage your people, to make sure you don't get surprised if a whole bunch of people decide not to come back this fall? None of us are immune. And when we get back together in the fall, I'm going to ask those same questions again. So now it's time to head for home. People who've been to the Good Leadership Breakfast before, which is less than half of you here today, are accustomed to hearing me say that the highest compliment any leader can ever get is you radiate goodness. So now I'm going to ask you, after coming back into the ballroom and being part of the Good Leadership Breakfast, are you ready to radiate goodness today? Okay, we're going to do that one more time, okay? Are you ready to radiate goodness today? Good. Thank you very much. We'll see you again in April. Thank you, Mike.